Welcome to What She Said. I'm your host, Lucy Lucroft, a journalist, blogger and podcaster based in Brighton. And you're listening to Series 4, Episode 6. In today's episode, I chat about Instagram growth with the award-winning Instagrammer Bronte Huskinson, aka From Be With Love. Bronte started out primarily in the Bookstagram community and quickly grew her Instagram and blog from 7k to over 35k followers. She then took a bit of a pivot as she grew and evolved from her previous moniker, A Bookish Bronte, to where she is now. A self-confessed feminist in training, she embraces the messiness and imperfection of life and has been really honest about hitting a wall with Instagram creativity, getting it wrong and making big changes even when her audience doesn't necessarily like it. Lastly, a reminder, please skip ahead if this bores you. I'm totally okay with that. Lastly, a reminder that my podcast course starts on Friday the 13th of June. So if you want to grab your spot and start your podcast in 6 weeks, head to the show notes where you can enroll for £125 or pay in instalments or pay whatever you can. Enjoy the episode.
So I'm Bronte and you can find me on Instagram at From Be With Love, and I'm mainly an Instagrammer and a blogger, and I primarily talk about books, but I also talk a lot about feminism and a lot of personal stuff as well.
And how did it all start for you? Because it's been a fairly meteoric rise. I was about to say to fame, I guess to Instagram fame.
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit over the years, but it started in about, I think it was 2015, and I just sort of stumbled across this community called Bookstagram. And at the time I was sort of, wanted to be a writer. I still want to be a writer. And I didn't really sort of know how to build up a community of other book-minded people. And then I stumbled across the hashtag Bookstagram, and then it was just filled with all these accounts and photos of lots of book photos. Most of them were flat lays at the time. And then I just fell in love with that community. And then from there, I started getting into a lot more book blogging. And as I got older and as the account really started to grow quite substantially over the course of about 2 years, I went from about 7,000 to about 35k in a matter of like 6 months or something. It was pretty ridiculous. But so I came into like this world, and then I thought, okay, I want to start talking more about stuff that's really important to me, like feminism and things like that, rather than just books. That's when the feminism side came in.
And that's when you did a bit of a rebrand as well.
Yes.
Which was really recent, wasn't it? It was only last month.
Oh yeah, it was literally only last month, but it was really exciting. I was previously Bookish Bronte, and I felt like that was quite limiting to what I wanted to do, and I started to want to sort of build a business around myself, and just having sort of the bookish name kind of sort of, I felt limited into what I could talk about, and I felt kind of stuck in sort of doing stuff that I wasn't 100% happy doing. So the rebrand has really helped me sort of branch out a bit more and also experiment more with what I'm doing. And I'm going in a slightly different direction next month as well, because I'm still not completely happy, but it's still something that I'm really glad I did, because without it I'd still be posting content that I didn't really like anymore. And I feel like now that I can actually talk about things rather than people saying, oh, you're not talking about books, you can't, you know.
I think that's a real thing for a lot of content creators. And you're particularly, you're going through a particularly kind of transformative time in that you only just graduated from university. When was it? Like just last year?
Yeah, it's coming up to like a year now.
Wow.
It's quite crazy. Yeah, it will be a year in July. So only
that's gone really quick.
I know, it's gone super quick.
So yeah, that's a super transformative time. If I had started my blog at the start of uni, like you had, then oh my goodness, how you change in that time.
Oh God, yeah. And I was never sort of like planned for this to happen either. Like I never thought that I'd be sitting here with like 50, nearly 60k followers. Like I never thought that would happen. So I think especially whether you especially don't really have a plan to become like a full-time blogger or Instagrammer, then you definitely change a lot more on what you want to talk about, I think.
And I really love how you talk about, because there's a couple of posts that always stick with me, and one was particularly about kind of getting stuck in a rut with Instagram and the ebbs and flows of it all. And for the majority of us who don't necessarily have a lot of brand collaborations or work commitments surrounding Instagram, it's not a job, those are fine because you can just take that couple of weeks off and wait for the creativity to come back. It's still very frustrating, of course.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be really FOMO-y and, but when it's your job, it's completely different because you have to push through them. And I loved how you talk about that really honestly.
Yeah, because I think it's really hard because I can see it on Instagram. I can see people who are like full-time Instagrammers and I can see that they're not really liking what they're doing anymore. Like I can really see, and it's kind of really disheartening a little bit. But, because it's your job, you have to sort of keep on going with it. But as soon as I start feeling like I'm not really loving my photos anymore and I'm not really excited to post them and I'm a bit like, oh, it's nothing new anymore, that's when I know that I have to change and go in a completely different direction to get like the excitement back into it. And I've done that quite a few times over the course of doing Instagram, at least like 6, but it could be more. And I think if I took a break from Instagram, I think it would be a lot worse for me because I'd come back and I'd sort of feel a lot of pressure to post something really great. Whereas if I just keep on posting and then sort of gradually weave in new content, then I find that a lot better rather than just being like, no, I'm just going to take a complete break.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. But it can be really frightening, can't it? And I think that probably is something, one of the qualities that I really like about you is that I do think in a world of influencers that you can see and I know what you're saying, you can see they're feeling the pressure and they're just... I don't know, like sleepwalking through their Instagram.
Yeah,
I do
that's
think
a great
that you're
word for it, yeah.
That's what it feels like, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I do think that you're brave. You do stand out to me in that you're always very honest.
Yeah, I think you have to be because you like I get called brave quite a lot, and to me it's just like, really, because like to me I've always been like a really open and honest person, and I'm never sort of gonna shy away from when I'm struggling because I think it's really important, especially if you have quite a big platform. And I guess I'm sort of big, but to me I'm sort of like medium sized, and there's a lot of bigger accounts which I think you have to be really honest about what you're feeling because your followers, they do feel like they know you, and to see that you're being honest about when you're struggling, that can really help them as well. And especially when I rebranded, I did a blog post about it and so many people read it and it was loads of people were really supportive, and it sort of encouraged I've got a lot of messages saying that some of them have been encouraged to change direction as well because I've seen that someone of my size is able to do it.
I think that's really important. That's it's not something that a lot of people talk about, and no. it is brave because actually we don't all need to just be honest. Like actually we could all sleepwalk through our Instagrams just to being inauthentic because for the majority of the time people aren't going to call you out on it.
No.
So you should take credit for that because it is a good quality, and that's why a lot of people, that's why your audience is so engaged, I think.
Especially after the rebrand, because I was really worried with that because I was like, I knew that I was going to lose followers. I didn't really think I was going to lose as much as I did, but that's fine because if they can't support me through the rebrand, then I don't, they're not going to be engaged followers anyway, so it's better if they unfollow. But my engagement has gone a little bit down. It's still quite high, so I'm sort of really grateful that they've been really supportive of it, because I know a few people that have changed completely and their engagement has gone way down, which can also be really discouraging.
Yeah, and I don't ever want to make light of it because when it's your job, when it's your job and your mortgage maybe relies on it, then it's actually not very easy and it's not very nice. And sometimes, especially in the current climate, there's a flipping Guardian article every week about how inauthentic we all are.
Every time I see one of those articles, I'm like, I feel the need to sort of like write a one back, like, no, we're not all of us are like that. Like I definitely see it, and I definitely, there definitely are people out there who are inauthentic and they promote stuff that really should not be promoted by people with an audience and stuff like that. But there's also so many other people that are promoting really good things, and it's just, I wish that more people could see like the good side of the influencer industry rather than just just seeing the really sort of somewhat shallow side that it can be, and sort of digging a little bit deeper, because you know, there are a load of influencers who are actually doing a lot of good.
You should write it then. You should write an opinion piece.
I think I've tried writing it quite a few times, and every time I feel like, oh yeah, this is not quite right. I'm always doing that with sort of meaty sort of blog posts. I always write it about 5 times before I actually end up publishing it.
So it's time to share my review of the week. My podcast review of the week is from Cecily, who says, I discovered what she said fairly recently, and I'm so glad I did. I love the variety but relevance of the different topics and guests. I also love Lucy's honesty, humour and vulnerability, and arriving late to the party means I have a whole archive to enjoy. I love that Lucy's making it a priority to be inclusive and diverse in the people that she invites as guests. It's so refreshing to hear different perspectives and experiences rather than the same old privileged nonsense you find on most other podcasts. Thank you so much. Your reviews mean so much to me. They really do. Let's talk about feminism and the role it's played in your Instagram journey, because you identify as a feminist, and you also do more than that in terms of you have a feminist book club and you talk about feminism quite a lot. How is that part of your journey played out online?
I've definitely grown a whole lot more as a feminist being on Instagram. Like, I've definitely become a lot more intersectional with my feminism. Like, you remember the whole slow fashion thing that happened a few months ago, and that sort of was like a massive eye-opener to me, and it's definitely made me grow. And in this book club, when I started it, it sort of really made me think about the books that I'm using for it, and the ones that I say I'm going to read, and make sure that they're more diverse, and that all the members of the book club are really diverse people as well. So it's definitely made me think a lot harder and a lot deeper about issues that other women face, rather than just white women, which I haven't seen many people talk about, apart from, you know, I've seen a lot of people in this community that I'm in talk about it, but outside of it, and a few other people that I follow, it's not really a massive discussion, and I think it sort of needs to be a whole lot more sort of in the forefront, especially if someone identifies themselves as a feminist.
Yeah, I completely agree. I couldn't have put it better myself. And I think the fact that you called yourself an intersectional feminist, and then also followed up with the things that you're actually doing to make your feminism intersectional is really important. I think it's very, very easy to be a white feminist.
Oh God, yeah. I'm not denying, you know, like a few months ago, like 6 months ago, I definitely was. Like, I didn't even think about issues that women of colour face and stuff like that. Like, it just wasn't in my mind. But over the course of a few months, I've definitely learned a whole lot more, and it's just made me think a lot more. So it's definitely, you know, and that's because of Instagram, and I never really thought that that would be a thing. But yeah, from Instagram, I've read a lot more feminism books and more intersectional books, and it's been a really helpful thing for me.
Have you found it hard in terms of your learnings in public? Because, like you say, intersectional feminism can really, really easily be overlooked by white feminists, and picked up and dropped as and when, you know, certain Instagrammers who have big followings feel like it.
Yeah.
And there's certain trends that I see, like veganism or zero waste or plastic free living and things like that can sometimes be picked up and dropped.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that quite a few times.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, definitely.
But as two women talking now, two cisgendered female identifying women, I think that's the right way to do it. I never know. You know, you're white, I'm white passing. It's kind of more on us to be calling that out and standing up for intersectional feminism. However, for me, it's a lot easier to do that. I have 5,000 followers. So, do you know what I mean? Like, I can lose brand collaborations. It doesn't really matter to me. Yeah. But for you, that is harder. And how do you draw the line between performative kind of intersectional feminism and actually living your values?
I think it comes into the authenticity. There we go. Argument. I think if someone is actually, like really passionate about what they're doing, then it will show in their sort of personal lives. Like I'm a writer, and so now I make sure that all my characters, they're not all just like white and cisgendered and straight. Like they're not all like, I make sure that I write really diverse characters and things like that. And whenever I look at brands, I always ask myself, like, are they cruelty free and stuff like that? And if they're not, no matter what the collaboration fee is, I'll say no to it. I don't work with any skincare companies that use plastic because that's not in my skincare routine. And I just think it just kind of shows in like their feed and if they're and what they're promoting. Like if you see that they've said, oh, I'm trying to not use single-use plastic, and then you see them promoting something that's wrapped in plastic, then they kind of like, to me, I remember these things and it's sort of, I think of them a little bit less. I'm like, oh, like you're just sort of doing it as a performance. And if I'm picking up on it, I'm pretty sure a number of other people are picking up on it as well. So I think that no matter what you do, I think if you're just using it as a performance, people will eventually see that it is a performance rather than seeing not, that it's not actually what you think as a person.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wonder though, at what stage you feel like you have to call it out, because sometimes that's a pressure that I feel.
Yeah.
Call it in it, maybe even. And I have friends who have inclusivity riders and things like that, which I think is a really good thing to have. And I certainly have started to do that myself, although it's kind of easy for me to do it because I don't get asked to do a lot of brand work or whatever. Is that something that you've thought about when it comes to kind of press trips or any kind of brand work, asking the question, can you tell me more about the other influencers that you're working with?
Yeah. In regard to press trips, I'll be honest and say no, that I it's not something that I've asked, but that's because I've only been on 2 other ones before. But it's definitely something that I sat down the other day, and I can't remember what it was. I was looking at Instagram, and it was something like a lot of travel influencers or something like that. They all went on this press trip, and I all noticed that they were sort of like white women, and then that's when it sort of clicked inside my head, and I was like, there aren't any like women of color that I see doing press trips. And I was actually having this discussion with my mum how the influencer industry is actually very, very white female led, and it's definitely something that I think I'm going to be thinking about more when it comes to stuff like press trips and things like that, because I haven't thought about it before in the past, but now that I think it's like press trip season or something, because I see I've got a lot of them on my feed at the moment, and I don't see any women of color doing them. And it's just sort of something that I've thought, is it just because they're really hard to find? Is it that, that people just prefer the white aesthetic? Like it's asking like a lot of questions going around in my mind.
I think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's definitely because I come from a travel background, there are so many people of colour in the travel industry. There's so many diverse travel influencers. And actually in this season of What She Said, I talked to Kirsty Leanne, who's a plus-size travel blogger. And that's something that she champions and calls out in other brands that who don't work with plus-size travel bloggers, which is the majority of them, because travel blogging and travel Instagram in particular is made up of some kind of huge accounts of mostly focusing on women in their bikinis, white women in their bikinis.
Or their thin lovely floaty dresses.
Exactly, in their linen. Well, actually, probably not so much linen in travel blogging. Linen is more like slow living and all that crap. But yeah, and I think minimalism is exactly the same. I think there's a few little pockets, but travel blogging particularly. And I said to Kirsty, do you have an inclusivity rider as somebody who is white and has privilege? And she pointed out to me that actually it should be the thin white women who are asking for inclusivity and not her. And she was absolutely right to say that.
Yeah.
But it's hard, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I'm I'm not going to use that I'm young excuse, but, like I'm still, learning, and, a lot of these things are stuff, that I don't think about. That's why I think of myself as like always in progress and sort of trying to, ask myself more questions and see whether this is a right thing for me, and also make sure, that other people, especially like minorities, are actually given these opportunities as well, because some of them are doing amazing jobs at what they do, and some of their content is amazing, but I hardly ever see them doing stuff like press trips and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really hard when you're in a world where you don't have to see it, because you're having to look outside of the norm for you and seek it out. And it's really good that you are honest about everything, about your journey, because that kind of, I think that helps other people feel less scared to try.
Because no one's perfect, are they? And everyone can always, everyone can say, oh, there's more ways that I could be a better feminist or be more inclusive. Like, no one is sort of at that sort of perfect standard, and if people say that they are, I think they're sort of lying, because there's always something else that you can be doing, or other questions that you can be asking yourself. And the more that I talk to people, the more books I read, the more I educate myself, the more the more I'm going to learn. And it's just really fun to sort of learn everything as well, and be on this crazy sort of Instagram journey that I'm on.
Let's talk a little bit about stumbling blocks that you found over your career, because so there's two things that are quite interesting about you. Is that you are primarily an Instagrammer, but you blog fairly prolifically, which doesn't always go hand in hand. If you're massive on one platform, like you don't often see somebody who is massive on YouTube and then also blogs prolifically as well. And I'm always interested when I meet those people to ask them, A, how they do it, because I never ever could, and B, if you see any difference between the content that you create and the audience that you attract on one platform versus the other.
Well, with my blog, primarily the people who read it are the ones that have come from my Instagram. So to me, they sort of are a bit more hand in hand. But for me, it's about, I don't just want to be an Instagrammer. I want to be like a blogger. I want to be a writer, and I want to start sharing more of like my fiction writing on different platforms. And I just think it's sort of that I don't want to be putting all my eggs in one basket, because Instagram isn't going to be around forever. I'm not going to be doing this forever. And for me, because I've always been doing Instagram and blogging pretty much, I've never noticed that it's been difficult, really. I sort of changed the way I do it now, because it can get quite overwhelming, and taking photos and writing blogs requires two very different mindsets. So I just I block out a week in every month where I just do photos, and then I block out a week in a month where I focus on writing. And I find that has really helped me sort of be in the right mindset to do one or the other.
Yeah, I think it can be really hard to flip between the two.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Especially when you're doing it so kind of intensively.
Yeah, definitely. It can be really hard. And I remember when I was doing them, sort of trying to do them both at the same time, and it just didn't work. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around trying to write a blog post, and I've just been doing like a really sort of tiring, grueling edit. I find it really difficult to sort of flip between those two brains, because they require really different sort of perspectives. Yeah,
I completely agree. And I don't have photography sessions as such, but where I have to separate out taking pictures / editing pictures for my blog and the writing of the blog post. I can't do the whole thing in one go, because it's just too much.
Yeah, it definitely is too much, and it can get quite overwhelming, and I find it really quite tiring as well.
Yeah, it is. I completely agree. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about Instagram because I know that if I don't talk to you about this, people listening will be like, what the hell? So this is a big question and feel free to not answer it. What are your best tips for growing on Instagram now? Because I think it's so different to even a year ago or 18 months ago.
God, yeah. I feel like I've been on so many podcasts and every time I've probably said something different because it's always, you can't, because it's such an annoying platform sometimes because you just don't know. Like a lot of the time it's just like one thing that works one week doesn't work the other week and you're like, oh, okay. And because it's reached mass adoption now, so there's more people on Instagram that aren't on Instagram, it's become so much different and so much harder. I saw an article the other day about how people want more in the moment, sort of less curated feeds, but I don't necessarily think that that's 100% true. I think people don't want to see really creative edits as much, but they want to see sort of a slightly more staged version of life a bit more. Which kind of, there's probably a lot of people listening going, what the hell does that mean? But yeah, in this article, they pointed out this account that had about like over 250k followers and their engagement was worse than mine. And then I follow another account that poses in front of like nice walls and stuff like that. And is like really gorgeous and goes to the beach and stuff and whatever. And she has about 80k and her engagement is like ridiculously high. So I think it's really hard to tell, but to grow now, I say that you've got to be doing something that no one else is doing, and that is very, very hard. So you just got to try and be as unique as you can and have something to say or do something that you don't see other people doing, because otherwise you just get lost in the sea of all the other photos like that and you're not going to stand out. And you've just got to be like a friendly person and engage with the community on Instagram and, just make a lot of friends, because they're most likely, if you become really good friends with them, then they're going to help you. And yeah, you just gotta keep going with it as well. Like, don't be afraid to start posting. You just got to do it, and don't expect to be amazing right away, because I certainly wasn't. I look back at my photos from even like last year and I'm like, some of them are just, I don't know why I posted that. But like it's a journey, and you just got to know that you're going to get better and better the more photos you take and the more you're on it. So growth isn't going to happen right away, but it will if you keep on working at it and just don't give up with it.
I think it's also important to talk about growth in the context of understanding why you want to grow, because something that I think people you can really feel like the more followers I have, or as soon as I get to 10k and get that swipe up, or that's the important thing. When if there's no reason for you to get there, then don't spend all your time trying to get there.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to know like the reason as to why you're wanting a platform, because they all require really different things. Like if you just want to be an influencer, then it requires of doing something very different, whereas if you want to be like an activist or a writer or something like that, required very different techniques. So it's definitely a good idea to sort of sit down and think, why am I doing this, and what's the point in me trying to grow my platform, and then seeing what other people in that community are doing and sort of adopt little things that they're sort of doing that you think would work for you.
And it's about just trying things out and experimenting, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
And not being afraid to have 6 pictures in a row that maybe aren't the aesthetic that you want, because you're just trying stuff out.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm always experimenting with my account now. I think I'm at a point where I'm just like, what's working, what's happening at the moment isn't working, so I might as well just try something new. And if that doesn't work, then I haven't really lost anything. So you just got to keep on trying different things and see what works. It's a massive game, and you choose to play it or you lose, essentially. So.
And what about some really juicy technical tips that you can give?
Technical tips, that's a really good one. mainly you've just literally just got to engage as much as you can. So like and comment on other people's stuff is probably the top thing that I can say. And when you've posted a photo, make sure you're engaging on that photo. People have commented on it, obviously reply to their comment and then go and comment on one of those photos, because that pushes your photo up in the algorithm, because it shows that you're being a really active user, and it will reward you for being a really active person on Instagram. So you just got to be active as much as you can, and you'll see that it works.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with that. But yeah, because doing as much as you can is really important.
Yeah.
But I definitely see a difference if I do a good bit of engaging half an hour before and half an hour after I post. Yeah, it does make a difference.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. I think people
annoyingly.
Annoyingly, yeah. I think people often overlook that, and there's a lot of accounts that are quite big, and I see that they don't reply to the comments, and to me that's like, why are you doing that? Like, why would you do that? And it's sort of because I've always been someone who replies to as many comments as I can, just because it's a nice thing to do. Like, and there's people that have got like over 200k and their photos have really bad engagement because they're not really engaging. So you've just got to engage as much as you can. And Instagram favors smaller accounts at the moment anyway. Like with my book club account, that's got maybe 2,000-3,000 followers, and the engagement on that is brilliant compared to the one on my main account.
Oh, wow.
So they behave very, very differently. Bigger accounts and smaller accounts, you usually get better engagement when you're a bit smaller. I don't know the Instagram science behind that, but that's just what I've seen from different accounts that I've had.
I think there does seem to be a bit of a critical mass in terms of engagement, and when you get to a stage where you're, I don't know, it's difficult to talk in terms of like small, medium, and large, isn't it? Because like it's all relative. I'm a very small influencer, but you also don't see yourself as a massive influencer. But to me, you're massive. So
yeah, to me, I'm just sort of, I think because it's a case of once you're there, you're a bit like, oh, this is what it feels like I think if I ever get to 100k, I'll probably thinking, oh, but there's people with like 200k.
But
and
that's it. Yeah,
you're always sort of striving for like the next thing, rather than sort of realizing that to other people I've got quite a big account and
it's massive.
But in my head it's like it's like medium size, I guess. But
imagine going out for coffee with all your Instagram followers.
Yeah, that's when I like, someone said to me the other day, they were like, oh, it's enough to fill like Wembley Arena and more. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's massive.
yeah. Then that sort of put in a bit of perspective for me. I was like,
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Imagine having like that many people following you around every day. That would be a bit
terrifying.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't all fit in your house, not even remotely.
Be spilling out into the street.
Exactly, it's mad, isn't it? When you put it like that, you're like, oh yeah, okay. I'm really glad not all of them engage with me every day. And what about for photography? Because you are definitely known for your photography, whether it's kind of super creative, surreal pieces, or beautiful. I know you don't do these so much anymore, but beautiful kind of bookish flat lays. And you used to do the behind the scenes pictures, which it's really interesting to see how much work goes into setting up that Instagram shot, let alone all the editing that goes with it. But what would be your best tips in terms of photography?
It would mainly just be to sort of start small and then work your way up. Like, I wouldn't recommend getting a big fancy DSLR thing sort of right away, because that takes away a lot of the steps that personally that I did. Like, I started out with it was like a iPhone 7 Plus camera, and that was it, and just apps on my phone. Like, I just used Snapseed and all the fancy editing apps like that. And then I moved on to more Photoshop, and then I stopped editing in apps and started editing in Lightroom. And then I got like a entry level camera, which I'm still using at the moment. And then now I've started using a really fancy lens for that. So I'm gradually working my way up. So just learn as much as you can and start small and with what you have. and eventually all the things that you've learned will actually, turn out really great in the long run.
That's a really good tip, and it mirrors. I remember Dominique saying in the episode where we chatted about Instagram that her and Dom just used I think it's a Nikon that they had to start off with. It's really old, and I think it's not even fully functioning. But it doesn't matter.
No, it really doesn't matter. Like, I notice the difference now between my camera photos and iPhone photos, but for everyone, it's not a necessity to sort of use a camera for your photos. Like, if you don't really need one, then, like, in my opinion, is like, why are you getting it? Like, I mainly got a bigger camera so I could shoot in RAW, so I can do more with the photos in Lightroom. But if you're not a person who wants to edit your photos a lot, then I personally don't think there's a lot of point in getting a camera, especially if you've, like, iPhone X cameras now are pretty great. So, like, it's not really, in my opinion, if you're just using Instagram as just, it's not going to be like a massive photography thing for you, then you might as well just use your phone.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're, like you say, if you're not using your pictures for your blog or whatever, and they don't need to be super high res. Yes. The best camera that you have, the best camera is the one that you have. Sarah Tasker say that, or did someone else say that?
Oh, it might have been Sarah. It sounds like something Sarah would
say. What, yeah. Everything I know from her.
Yeah.
So, what's next for you?
Well, it's coming up to May when we're recording this. So in May, I'm starting something new again. It's slightly different from what I'm usually doing. And what I'm planning on doing is writing a story about the photos that I've posted on Instagram. So the way, in my mind, the way that it's working is that I'm telling a story with my photos on Instagram, and at the end of the month I will write a short story about it on my blog, because I wanted to start getting my writing more into what I'm doing, and because I feel like I sort of lost that a little bit. I became like an influencer rather than like a writer, which is actually what I wanted to be doing. So yeah, I'll be sharing more of my writing work, which is exciting but scary at the same time.
It's really exciting. Are you going to be doing that on your Patreon primarily, or?
It's going to be on my blog, that the short story about my Instagram, of what my Instagram has told for the month. But I'll also have a Wattpad where I just, put all of my other writing stuff that it just doesn't go on my blog.
And where can everybody find you online?
You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter at FromBeWithLove, and you can also find me on my blog at FromBeWithLove.com.
Is your Patreon still open for people to support you there as well?
Yeah, my Patreon is FromBeWithLove as well, if you'd like to join my Patreon as well, which would be really lovely.
Cool. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoy it. You can get in touch with me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm at Lucy Lou Craft. I'd love you to leave a review for the show if you have time. All of the information that we chatted about in this episode is in the show notes. You can find everything at lucyloucraft.com/podcast. See you next week.